Okay.
All right, good to go.
It is. Great. For those of you who were able to join us at the US AON Showcase at Arctic Summit Science Week in March, I just want to welcome you back and hope we can build on the excellent work we did there. For those of you who were not able to join us at that meeting, we hope we can provide enough context for you so that you can feel included and understand what we mean by some of the concepts we're sharing today, starting with what we mean by advancing effective stewardship. So we'll get into some of those points as we move forward. But first, we're going to just do a few introductory points if we go to the next slide about our plans for our meeting today. We are planning a 2-hour meeting, which is kind of somewhere between a mini workshop and a normal IARPA collaborations team meeting. We wanted to give ourselves time to really be able to build on our discussions and build the relationships that I think many of which were initiated or deepened at our time together in Boulder. So at the beginning, we're going to spend some time on introduction and context just to make sure we're all kind of remembering or learning about what brings us together today. And we've left time for a little bit of discussion about that context because we may learn from you other valuable ways that we can use this meeting time together today. We principally plan to spend the remainder of the meeting working in breakout discussions about building on this stewardship idea for the US Arctic Observing Network, what we mean by distributed stewardship, and how different efforts can be led. So we'll spend some time in breakouts doing that, and then spend a good amount of time also in report back and discussion. So as Hazel said, this is meant to be an extremely interactive meeting here today, and we're really looking forward to largely hearing from you after we set that context. So on our next slide, I am going to pass this back to Hazel to help unpack why we're slightly shifting the context in which we're using IARPA collaborations for the observing discussion.
Yeah, thanks, Sandy. I see a fair number of familiar faces on the call. So for those of you that have been engaged in IARPIC for a while, you'll know that there's been a couple of different groups doing observing related activities, especially since the most recent Arctic Research Plan came out and created the new collaboration team, the Monitoring, Observing, Modeling, and Predictions collaboration team. And we have some of the co-leads for that group on the call today as well. The observing community of practice has always been an important group within IARPIC, but with so many different groups taking on different pieces of the observing puzzle, we thought it would be helpful to clarify what was really the main piece that this group would be taking on. So what used to be the IARPIC Observations Community of Practice is changing its name to the US Arctic Observing Network Community of Practice. The US Arctic Observing Network is an existing sub-body of IARPIC focused on strategy and planning within Arctic observations. And we have a federal board, and thanks to many of our US AON federal board members that were able to join the call today. It's really great to see you all. And so this change is going to align that sort of public-facing community of practice with the work of the US Arctic Observing Network group more broadly. And we'll strengthen the link as well to the US AON deliverables in the Arctic Research Plan. And if you have questions about that, happy to answer them. Some of this is a little bit backgroundy. We're just happy that you're here and joining this call. And just to make sure everyone's aware, what about the other pieces of the observing conversation that are not strategy and planning focused? And I want to make sure folks are aware that we also, as I mentioned, have the Monitoring, Observing, Modeling, and Prediction team, sometimes referred to as MOMP. They're focusing on a pretty broad set of observing related topics, especially some issues where there's overlaps between observing and modeling, and those have been really interesting conversations. We also have the Field Operations Community of Practice, which hosts a pre and post field season meeting each year and supports the vessel tracker and mooring tracker on the IARPIC website. And they're doing really important work for that sort of year-over-year change in Arctic observing. And we also have a lot of topical teams, such as the sea ice team that deal with sort of observing related issues in their particular focus area. So on the next slide, I think if you want to join or adjust your membership to any of these teams, you can do that on the IARPIC Collaborations website. You'll want to go to the team page and look for this join button. If you don't see the join button, it means you're already a member of that team. So I'll put a couple links in the chat for how you can follow up on this. And maybe just pause quickly to see if any of the other team leaders want to add anything or if there's any questions. And if not, I will pass it back to Sandy, I believe.
Yes, so thanks so much for that, Hazel. And we're looking forward to this new format to help kind of clarify and focus how we use the IARPIC collaboration space. We do plan to regularly hold these meetings in coordination with our US AON federal board. So they have their own separate Fed-only meetings, but we recognize through the showcase and other opportunities that having more interaction between our federal board and non-federal communities in the concept of IARPIC collaborations is really beneficial. I would normally be passing it over to Torsten Marcus, who is the chair of our board right now, but we heard moments before the call that he got swept up into some urgent NASA business. And so he sends his apologies for the welcome and this first session, and he does plan to join us for the second hour. So I will just do my best to help convey some of the things that Torsten might have wanted to convey. Hazel mentioned we do have other US AON board members on the call, and during the discussion that follows this point, we really welcome them to chime in as well. So on the next slide, we just want to share with you who the faces are on our federal board. At the moment, this has been substantially updated over the last 3 months as many people have retired and moved into other roles. But the kind of principles of how this board convenes and why are still quite robust, as is the current membership. So the multi-agency conversation is really helping the feds identify the kind of combined data needs and how the data providing agencies can better support the agencies that need data, and how the data providing agencies can better collaborate with each other to advance needed capabilities. So that's just sort of a succinct summary of the types of things our board is working on, and some of the points that ended up as part of our showcase discussion were issues that the board themselves thought were highly important or were part of their own work plan that they felt could be better informed by engaging with a broader non-federal community. And we'll talk about some of those things in a moment. On the next slide, just again, in crafting our agenda with our board leadership for this meeting, talking about their perspective on the purpose and outcomes. I guess I already hit on the first bullet point, is that we're really kind of initiated a nice discussion about a collaborative vision for the decade ahead for US engagement in the Arctic Observing Network activities, both from a federal and non-federal perspective. And so we wanted to get back together after summarizing and digesting those points and keep that dialogue moving, which we'll have time to do today, but also think about doing something as concrete as moving towards community white papers or broadly led white papers that could pick up different parts of this vision and begin to turn it into more concrete terms. And then one target for white papers like this would be something like the 2026 Arctic Observing Summit, but there's also other ways that we can take this dialogue forward. And we hope to talk about some of those things today. So on the next slide, I believe it shifts to the piece I was going to help to introduce. And so this, again, is just some reminders about some relevant organizations that are very active in this kind of planning and organizational advancement space. So for those who aren't familiar, we'll kind of touch on a few of those organizations and terms just so we can all use the same language where possible. Related to this point about advancing stewardship, I'll share some of the concepts that come from the field of polycentric governance, where polycentric governance is a form of institutional analysis that helps us to understand how organizations work and what kinds of mechanisms we can put into place in order to better sustain and advance efforts when we're talking about polycentric, many centers of action, be they federal, non-federal, and all the different forms non-federal centers of action can take. And then again, I'll show some more specifics on white papers and other opportunities. So on the next slide, and this is going to be a click through. So we have this diagram we often illustrate about the Arctic system of systems, how the AON concept on the first click through is really sort of a system of systems or network of network concept that ranges across the different spheres from, spheres as we think about them, cryosphere, atmosphere, marine, terrestrial, these kinds of different broad areas of effort, but also the system as a whole, how we can think about it more holistically, and what the specific mechanisms are and needs are to better promote Arctic data collection and sharing. So the concept of an Arctic observing network, it's a conceptual network. It was a term brought forward through the work of the last International Polar Year and a National Academies study. It is sort of the kind of both international and broad concept that we talk about is the AON. We know there's also a National Science Foundation AON program. So you see AON show up in different settings. On the next bullet we'll look at is the concept for the US AON. And so when we talk about the US AON, these are the specific coordination and planning initiatives that support effective AON efforts nationally and internationally. So the distinction here being one being very broad, network of networks, the US AON, and what this self-forming team will focus on is the coordination and planning initiatives. And then the last bullet here is the Sustaining Arctic Observing Networks, or SAON, which is a body like US AON, which serves as an international facilitator for Arctic and non-Arctic states, permanent participants, and Arctic Council working groups to also advance that first definition in the list, the broad concept. SAON also works very closely with the Arctic Observing Summit, which is a biennial summit, very grassroots, more than 300 people join each year to kind of collectively inform these concepts and advance the AON. And so on the next slide, I think what you will see is, oh, no, I have a slide later on the AOS, so I'll return to the AOS. So conceptually, and this is kind of getting into that, what do we mean by stewardship and distributed stewardship? So this infographic sort of shows how our current concept for the US Arctic Observing Network works, with our US AON board sitting at the center. We call this our facets diagram, using the nice image of the six-sided ice facets, ice crystal facets. Our board sits at what we think of as sort of a science policy interface, where they can, from a grassroots perspective, stay through things like benefit assessment partnerships, which is an activity of the US AON, through IARP collaborations, this space, and international collaboration, can stay in contact with some of the grassroots technical science and technology issues that we really need our federal agencies to help us address and solve. And then they're also connected through the IARPIC principles as an official subcommittee to the kind of policy, resource, and planning spaces. And so US AON as a whole, and especially its board, is really a science policy type of a body. And these lighter blue facets are really some of the ways that Hazel and I, through non-federal partnerships and other capacities, try to bring good information and good content into this space to inform the policy, resource, and planning issues. And through you and your engagement in things like our benefit assessment partnerships, IARPIC collaborations, and SAON and the AOS, you also contribute to that science policy conversation and inform our federal board. On the next slide, what we were really hoping for, back one, what we were really hoping for through our showcase discussion and subsequent discussions is recognizing that the stewardship of these issues that's being attended to by our board, or through activities that Hazel and I lead, or through activities like the RNA Co-ops project, and other efforts that you all represent on this call, that we are all in our own way working to advance the effective stewardship of the Arctic Observing Network concept. But we recognize that the things that we have put in place up until now should and could continue to grow and expand, especially as we're looking ahead to the International Polar Year. So these facets that don't have any language inside of them, this is where we really want to invite and encourage a lot of visioning through this call and ongoing efforts. So please kind of think about, what would you put in your facet? What would you want to lead? What do you think are the important efforts? And as we look at the next slide, I just want to invite people to, when the slides are posted, to look at some of the workshops from the Ostrom workshop at Indiana University, and think about the concepts that they're talking about, especially in this concept of distributed stewardship. Distributed stewardship is one of the tenets of effective polycentric governance. It's what leads to sustainability and effective outcomes. And so it's why we use this term stewardship a lot, why we're talking about these facets for distributed stewardship, some of the language we're using in this call. That's where it's coming from, and that's what we're inviting you in to contribute to and consider. And this little video alone is just a really excellent description, I think, of what we're trying to accomplish in this space. I will note, if you click forward once, Hazel, that some of us have already started drafting concepts towards a white paper on this, derived from some work we did at the AGU last year. So that includes some folks on the call like Hazel, Hayo, Margaret Rudolph, and Jan Renee Larson. And this is, if you're interested in this topic, we would also invite you to help us shape this white paper. And then I think the next slide sends it back to the Arctic Observing Summit. So we'll come back to this towards the end of the call, but I had mentioned the potential for white papers on this distributed stewardship topic, and individual aspects of distributed stewardship that you might want to think about. I think the AOS would be a great target for those. And now I believe it goes back to Hazel.
Okay, thanks, Sandy. I think my role is to now introduce a couple of the sort of breakout room concepts that we were thinking we would discuss today. And these build off of the discussions that we had with many of you at the Arctic Science Summit week earlier this spring, as well as some conversations that we've had with our federal board on topics that they're interested in or would like to see some broader conversation with the community. So this is a image from the showcase, and that's up to the next slide. We have this nice briefing report that we pulled together to go over some of the key themes from the workshop. If you weren't there, I do recommend taking a look at this. Some topics that came up were sort of the complexity and the many different people involved in the AON. As Sandy's talked about, this sort of multifaceted network with many different components that make up the whole. Folks also talked a lot about the critical role of partnerships, relationships, and boundary spanners, the importance of Indigenous knowledge and community-based monitoring, data management, sharing, and interoperability, and how we can improve those aspects. That'll be one of our topics for today. We talked a bit about emerging tech tools and strategies, and then there were ongoing conversations about funding and sustainability in the current moment and always. So that's a little bit about the showcase itself. This is just an image from the notes, and I'll share a link to that as well. These are the pieces we had decided would be good topics to bring forward to the community today to have some more discussion on. These different facets of US AON stewardship, including data coordination, community liaisons, and local coordination hubs, and establishing and applying inventories. And so these are the proposed breakout sessions for today. I think there's an opportunity if folks want to add other ideas, or we'll consider that before we jump into anything. But just be thinking about which of these conversations might be interesting to you and if there's anything you would add. And I think, Sandy, after this, I might pass it back to you to give some more specific framing, or should we open up the discussion? We've had some last minute changes in the
if you go to the next tab, I think it is our discussion tab. So this was really just to say that was the setup that between our federal board co-chairs and Hazel and I that we had thought would be useful for today. And we just wanted to give people a chance to dialogue around that and to see what else you might like to see come from today, or certainly if there's any other facets. And then we'll start kind of canvassing, trying to figure out which breakout rooms people want to go into and if we need more than one for different topics. So the floor is open via text or via chat or coming off mute.
Hi, this is Noor. I just wanted to ask for clarification about the goal of the discussion. So I appreciated this summary of kind of very high level summary of what was discussed and then how you arrived at these topics. And so is the thought to just kind of deepen and extend some of the themes that started to emerge from the AON showcase? Is that kind of the thinking behind our conversation today?
Yeah, great question, Noor. And yeah, I was just going to say, if we go to the next slide, we do have some more detailed questions about how we might establish these facets, what they should focus on, who should lead them. That's always a key question that we ask in this space. Like, is this something that should be federally led or led from outside of the federal family? And if it's helpful, we could also look at the report back framework that Lauren Culler helped us to draft. Lauren is also one of the co-chairs for our new US AON team. And so these are some of the report back questions that you would be thinking about. And I think there's also some note-taking documents to capture these things. Does that help, Noor?
Yep, that's helpful. Thank you, Sandy.
It was a really useful question. I know it's not always clear what's going to happen in breakout groups. So knowing this additional detail, is there interest in working on a topic or a subtopic that anybody would like to declare? I can see that with 30 people, we're probably already going to break into more than one group per topic. Maybe, I don't know, Hazel, if we can do a quick poll to see who might join which topic, just so we can get a sense of how many breakout rooms we should lead. And I guess the other point that was part of that or part of the first set of questions, or that would be useful right now, we've talked about things like AOS white papers. Are there other avenues that people think that developing these white papers or developing these dialogues could better serve? I know Mark Parsons is on the call, and he had mentioned some work about IPY work. I don't know if you want to share that now or later.
I can. I think it really, the stuff that I've been working on really relates to the data coordination piece, and using sort of IPY as a milestone for, a step increase in how we improve our data stewardship and coordination. I've been working mostly internationally at this point. So we have, all right, I guess I will provide a quick summary. So I'm representing CODATA, the International Science Council's Committee on Data. And CODATA has applied to be part of the IPY planning group. We have not heard back yet. And I'm working with Chantel and Michaela to host a session at International Data Week about data coordination. That is the week before the Polar Data Forum, so there'll be further discussion of that at the Polar Data Forum. There's a lot going on, both in the Arctic and bipolar, around data coordination and data principles, reworking the IARP data principles, and the IASC data principles, IASC data statement. And so we're thinking about proposing a task group as part of the IPY planning group to sort of lay out an initial data strategy. Do we need an IPY data policy, or can we build off existing policies? What would be needed to implement the policy to meet the goals of IPY, that sort of thing. But again, I think this fits into the broader context of polar data writ large, and just using IPY sort of as a milestone and to sort of, give a push of activity in this area.
Great. Thanks, Mark. Yeah, that very helpful context that, there are these kind of stepping stone conversations, such as the Arctic Observing Summit, and then there's this broader and longer time frame of the International Polar Year that we can already be thinking that we might be informing. I additionally see that Russ Schomburg made a request or a suggestion that maybe technology development needs could be part of this conversation. I think that's excellent. Hazel, I think you might have captured that in your poll already. Okay, so the poll is ready. So we'll put the poll out, and please just indicate which room you think you might be joining, and then that'll help us determine how many breakout rooms to make. And if there's any further questions about the purpose of the breakout rooms or that type of thing, just let us know in the chat.
Nice. It looks like we've got, most folks have answered. Waiting on 4 people. I'll give you just one more moment. One of those is me, and I don't think I can answer the question. So, all right, holding steady at 23. Oh, got one more. All right, perfect. And hopefully this publishes the result, and yeah, share the results. So great. It looks like we have most folks interested in the data piece or in community liaisons and coordination hubs, 10 and 11 respectively. Inventories and tech look like fairly small groups. But as long as there's 2 people that are interested in talking about that, that sounds okay. And if that conversation ends early, you can just go ahead. I'll make the breakout room so you can move between them. So maybe
So
2.
Yeah,
for,
2 data.
All right, 2 data, 2 community. We'll change this one. Room 6 will be tech. And before I create the rooms and everyone disappears, I should share this. I'll change. I will update room 6 so that it becomes tech focused. But you should, in this Google Drive, this has notes documents, so you'll see already, you'll just join the one that is the same as your room number. They should be labeled the same. And if there's any issues, I will hang out in the main room for a couple of minutes and make sure everyone's settled before I move anywhere. So with that, any last questions? I'll go ahead and open the rooms. All right, you should be able to self-select. So next to those rooms, you'll see a join button. There's 2 data rooms. Just try to self-distribute if you're in the community liaisons or data groups. So there's about 5 in each. And thanks so much. Oh, I should say we will come back around 15 after.
Hazel, this is Florence, and I'm not seeing the rooms. Where do I need to look to see the rooms?
You might need to go to the More button.
Okay, thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, sometimes it pops up and sometimes it doesn't. I don't know what the.
Thanks very much. Got it.
Okay, perfect.
Hazel, I just got a note that my computer might reboot in 2 minutes. So I'm going to just hang out for a second and then I'm going to join.
Yep.
So data, there are 2 data rooms, but one I think just has 1 person in it. The other has 5. Should I just join the one with just, oh, here's none. Okay, never mind.
Yeah, I think go in the second one with Larry and Mark if
Okay.
that works. Yeah, we'll just try to sort of distribute folks. And Amy, are you there? It looks like you just came off mute, but I can't hear you.
I can't hear Amy either.
Yeah.
And I'm just hanging out until I decide figure out the best place for me to go because I'll go anywhere.
Okay.
Okay.
Once
Can
we
you
get
hear me
folks
now?
sorted. Yes.
Amy, yeah, we can
All
hear
right,
you.
yes. It helps when you plug in the microphone. I was saying I was dealing with an insurance question, a medical insurance question real quick, and then I was going to go into inventories, which looks like only has 1 other person. So but
Yeah,
I
if
can
you want to
join
go
in.
in, I was going to ask if you could jump in that room and chat with Alice and see what she's thinking about. And I'll try to join you all, but I do want to keep an eye on the main room to make sure there's a couple people that we're going to join for the second hour, and I don't want them to be lost in the waiting room for too long.
Okay.
That sounds good. And I'm assuming the inventories is like what we've been talking about with the data across agencies. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. There's other kinds of inventories too, but I think
Okay.
that's good. Yeah.
All right. Sounds good.
Thanks, Amy.
And
Thank
it looks
you.
like Sandy went to a data room and then and Amy's going to inventories. I can either join inventories or tech, Hazel. Do you think one is more important than the other?
I don't. I think whatever you're more interested in, or
Okay.
you're also welcome to join the community liaisons and hubs. I
There's
guess.
a lot of folks in there, so I
Yeah,
think.
yeah.
And hi, Brian.
Hi, Brian. It looks like you're off mute, but we can't hear you either. Oh, there you are.
Yeah, hello.
Hi, how are you feeling?
So. Thanks.
Yeah. I hope the
In
recovery goes okay. Well,
Yeah, in some ways, inventories and tech could be combined. Because the inventories do include what technology and platforms and instruments you use.
yeah, what's used, and then I think some of what's needed is helpful. But yeah, maybe at some point I'll jump to the tech room and suggest that if they wrap up, they could join the inventories call and share ideas for the second half or something. Are there any of those groups that you're interested in joining?
Who are you asking?
I'm asking you.
Oh, I didn't know. I originally put down tech, but it could be both.
Okay. Do you want to move to the tech room?
Yeah,
Okay.
that's fine. Thank you.
I'll move you over there. You should see a pop-up to join, and if you don't, let me know.
So some of us are going to join the other data breakout room because it ended up too small. So we're going to have one big room rather than one tiny room.
Okay, that sounds good. I'm probably just going to hang out here. It seems like some folks are jumping in and out, so. Larry, you know where you're going? Good to see you. And Katie, are you there? Katie, if I'm not able to hear you, it looks like you're on mute, but if you are there, we have the whole group is just in breakout rooms. So if you'd like to join, let me know, and I'll get you to the correct room. So I think we'll jump next. Stacy, I think you're reporting out for the next hubs group. So you can build from one of those to the next. Stacy, are you? Oh yeah.
Yeah. Just which screen has the unmute?
We hear you now.
I need to restart this poor laptop. It's struggling. I appreciate hearing a lot of the same things that we talked about in our breakout room, from the examples of observing, especially with community partners. We also talked about the need right now to find whether they're international or private sector and nonprofit partners to draw examples from, to learn about models that they have that are working well and that are sustainable and working well both from community's perspective and from the researcher's perspective, to make sure that this work is sustained and doesn't fall off with the federal instability that is making it challenging in some cases in the US right now. So part of that would be looking into the existing resources that we can draw those examples from and strengthening those relationships. There are definitely issues around capacity and stability in community areas, as well as, of course, in agency partnership or the partners that are federal agency related. So making sure that there are some of those either writing as part of this process or looking for some of the guidelines that already exist, things like what you can already have written down for mission and vision and your values as a community hub or as a partner, so that when researchers come up with a potentially short timeline, you can already have some of that work done to compare, like, is this going to be a good fit? Are we aligned? And certainly building that out for community partners, but then also as researchers are reaching out to find observers or to connect in to community areas, you know, different regions, into these broader observing networks. Like, are they upfront about, here's what we're doing this research for, and here are the values under which we work, or the ways that we make decisions. And then our Rosebud Thorn, we went over again some of the pilots of programs, and then the nonprofits. One additional thing we talked about was, you know, the role for Alaska Native corporations, specifically here in doing observing, and how they've historically supported it, and then what is newly being developed. They're a partner that doesn't often end up in these types of conversations. Thanks, Hazel.
Thank you, Stacy. And yeah, thanks for that group for some more interesting ideas. Next, we'll jump to the inventories group.
Sure, I can report in for this one. We were a small group, and we also went a little bit off script with the guiding questions. But we kind of had two, well, the central theme of our discussion largely circled back to a lot of uncertainty in why we do inventories, kind of what they might be used for, what the reasoning is behind a larger effort to inventory observing capabilities or assets, and then what that then translates to in terms of how you're actually doing the inventory, what's included, what scope, what kind of information is gathered. So we did a little on the fly brainstorming about different kind of different scenarios in which inventories might get used. Would love to hear your thoughts as well if you have ideas. And a couple ideas came out of this. One is just kind of a base sense that inventories and broadly US AON, knowing what US AON is important, but we don't have a really clear, well-articulated message on why. And so that makes the broader effort to do those inventories a little bit harder to get going. We think the most compelling argument for it is kind of broadly under the category of gap assessment and kind of figuring out what's missing, but also kind of in a very forward-looking way, thinking about what might be the best investments moving forward to advance the U.S. Arctic Observing Network. So we think if there is a larger inventory work moving forward, it makes sense for US AON kind of sitting in a federal position to lead the charge, recognizing that most of the work would be at the agency level, task for individuals from those agencies working with subject matter experts and others outside to pull together the pieces. We think it probably is a strategy to upfront think about what information might be needed across a much larger inventory effort, and then focus one thematic area at a time, just as a way to kind of motivate and bite off slightly more manageable pieces than the entire of Arctic observing in one go. I think that was really the big things. We really came up with many more questions than we answered.
Thanks, Alice. I appreciate that discussion. And yeah, look forward to more discussions on that topic. I think it would be Brian or Russ if you have anything from the tech group or anyone else that was in that group.
Sure, I'm happy to speak. So we got a little distracted because it turns out we're both from Rhode Island. So there's a bit of discussion about the Graduate School of Oceanography. But moving down through the document, the We thought that tech development maybe should just be tied into inventory. So, and I heard Margaret, go over some things that we also talked about same time. But we should focus on identifying the needs of scientists as well as identifying research needs of local communities. And then identifying how new technology, whether that's like AI or computer vision, but also robotics type technology, how that can be tied directly to those research needs. And a big part of this is, there's a huge focus on remote sensing, but there needs to be development for in situ data collection that's able to ground truth those remote sensing and modeling type of collection. And then we also talked about how there's some good models in the oceanography and ocean science world. For example, they have a lot of tech-focused symposiums. They do a lot of work with dual-use industry and research, as well as military use as well. And some examples of that is like the Blue Innovation Symposium on the East Coast, the Maritime Alliance on the West Coast. And we also discussed that there's some success in the Canadian models of doing this as well, such as them being a sponsor of the Blue Innovation Symposium. And then you also see a lot of community-led science going on in like the deep sea and oceanography world that's gaining steam. And so next steps are really to identify some clear goals and challenges where we can take a look at either technology gaps or excessive costs that are sort of low-hanging fruit that technologists can start to go after. Brian, did you want to add anything?
No, I think that's excellent. When it comes to tech, it applies to all environments, whether it's glaciers or forestry or limnology or ichthyology, including development of new technology and sensors. And as a scientific and regulatory agency in our permitting, whether it's offshore wind or sewage treatment plants or other sources of point or non-point sources of pollution, EPA may have requirements in their monitoring programs to monitor and measure certain parameters, whether it's in the soil, air, water, or biota. And as I talked to Russ, when we do that, and I had to do that with some multi-million-dollar programs on the West Coast, we had to come up with methodology that would be scientifically and technically defendable. And so we couldn't, and we wouldn't go somewhat esoteric on a permittee. Well, we need to know this information also. In other words, the data have to be hardened and also be fair. And the last thing, as Russ mentioned, when we're looking about tech now, we literally are going from the bottom of the deepest part of the ocean to 200 miles in space, including the satellites. All of that is being used in the coastal zone, Great Lakes, and even for harmful algal blooms, the entire country. Thank you.
Thank you both. Sounds like it was a really interesting discussion and that you both may have a lot in common. I think I'm passing it to Sandy at this point.
Indeed. So yeah, so we've left our huge thanks to everybody for all the work in the breakout rooms. There's a lot to digest in the notes. The documents will be open, so continue adding your thoughts as we're in discussion. In the spirit of this being a joint US AON board meeting and open collaboration meeting, we've got about 15 minutes, tipping towards 20 for discussion. And so I've asked the board members to prepare any reflections or comments that they'd like to lead with. And I'm happy to see Torsten has joined us and he's got his hand in the air. So please, Torsten, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you. And apologies again that I, on very short notice, couldn't make it. And I threw Sandy under the bus here. I'm really apologetic here. It's very hectic times, and things come up and that need to be taken care of here at NASA. So this was really great to hear all these thoughts. And I think in the bigger picture, you know, and as Sandy knows, we need an Arctic data strategy now more than ever, probably, especially in these times. And because, you know, we need to defend more than ever why we're doing it, why we're taking those measurements, why we're doing research in the Arctic. It's not about for papers anymore. It's about why is it needed? And so if we do an Arctic data strategy, it needs to go along with a clear cost value analysis, I think. Why are we taking this data? Why is it needed? And why is coordination critical to be efficient here? I think, and via IARPIC or via AON, we have this opportunity as, you know, different federal agencies together with the communities to work together to come up with a plan that you know, is convincing to the government, so that they continue and maybe commit for continuous funding of these critical Arctic observations. And there are lots of things going on in the Arctic. There's increased marine transportation, there's coastal erosion, impact of permafrost on transportation, etc. So it's very easy for us to make the case. But I think we do need to make the case. And our research needs to be more, and I think Martin Jeffrey said it in a meeting recently. You know, our research needs to be more than, you know, he said, more than just papers that collecting dust. It needs to be, you know, have a clear purpose. Why does, you know, the community, why does the world, why, you know, why do we benefit from this research and from those data? I can go on, but I let somebody else talk.
Thanks, Torsten. It looks like Hayo has a direct response. And so Hayo, if you want to chime in with a direct response, and then if any other board members want to follow Hayo with their observations as well.
No, I'll give first. I'll cede the floor to the board members. I'll lower and then re-raise my hand. Thanks.
I think if your response was directed, it's perfectly
No,
appropriate.
it was. I think it's a bit broader. I mean, it was partly prompted by, but let's hold off a sec. Thanks.
Okay. Anyone else want to share a perspective from the side of the board?
I'll chime in real quick. You know, I was, in addition to the group I was in where we had a lot of questions, I was looking at the data coordination notes and, you know, talking about fair use and interoperability. And that's something in my previous position at NASA, that's something I worked with and thought about for 15 years. So it is a problem, you know, different repositories, different organizations, you know, format their data differently. You know, there are international standards out there to help with that, like Darwin Core, but not everybody uses them. So I don't, this is just me thinking out loud, but I'm wondering if we need more access to, you know, Python codes or something that converts, you know, data from separate repositories into a format that's standardized depending on, you know, what you're using the data for, something like that. Because I don't think we're going to get everybody on board with one standard, although that would be great, wouldn't it? But so yeah, getting everybody to do this, everything the same way is a challenge. We're getting there. But I would love to hear more about, this is something I've just been struggling with. So I'd love to hear more about what the group was thinking with regards to data coordination and how we can move forward with that. So that's kind of my brain dump from the discussion.
Great, thank you so much, Amy, and these really data-directed conversations. It sounds like there's just a lot of opportunity to move this conversation forward. Lauren, color.
Yeah, thank you. And I apologize, I got kicked out of the Zoom. My system totally rebooted at the end of the breakout session, so I missed some of the reporting out from the community groups, but very glad we have the notes. I think I just wanted to offer appreciation for the chance to convene today as the board and the broader Arctic observing community. I think that the space is really important right now as we're all sort of thinking through the challenges in all of these spaces, and definitely heard a lot of very creative thinking in the group that I was in on inventories. And I'm just really fortunate that we can capture some of that and also kind of think among the groups that we're discussing today what some of the emerging maybe approaches are in sort of resource constrained times, trying to be very strategic. That really informs, I think, also what the federal board can work on together. So I just want to thank everybody for showing up and contributing today, and look forward to staying engaged with everyone.
Great, thanks for that, Lauren, much appreciated. I got kicked out too. It's something's in the air today. Any last thoughts from the board before we kind of just throw the floor open to general conversation? All right, I think Hayo, that lines you up for our next comment, and others please either raise your hand or enter the chat, or as you wish.
Yeah, thanks, Sandy, and I appreciate all that you and this group do, you know, particularly at this time where there's significant challenges, which from my perspective may require us to think about both the stewardship aspect of the conversation, which to me implies that there's a long-term plan and a long-term commitment to both maintain and grow, in this case, observing resources and resources that archive the data and information products. And clearly that we're challenged in terms of how do we do that, right? I mean, if I just this morning see that climate.gov is basically being sent on its way out, you know, that other data centers internationally are pulling data off of US servers to ensure some level of continuity. I mean, that's the reality that I guess all of us, but you in particular from on the federal side, are living in. So I'm wondering, what is it that we need to be doing in the near and midterm to sort of commit to that stewardship aspect? And I really like this sort of the words distributed or polycentric approaches, which to me right now means looking towards other partners, whether they're sitting in other countries or whether they're partners within the US, potential partners that haven't been as engaged as before. Trying to engage with those groups, whether it's private sector, foundations, foreign institutions that have longer term plans for observing and data stewardship. To me, that's central. And you know, I guess I mean, there's different ways that we could do that, but what I'm trying to figure out is what's the best mechanism for all of us to do that, just because of the urgency. I was reminded, you know, and we have Lauren Culler on here, that NSF had a Dear Colleague letter out a couple of years ago on, you know, help or soliciting ideas for a workshop or a series of workshops to think about the future of the AON program, the NSF supported AON program. And that, you know, and it didn't get a lot of responses, and I understand the frustration by the program managers who issued that, but to me that frustration of not seeing something also has to acknowledge that the research community has been working on this for a long time. Like I recall being part of efforts like the most recent IPY, where there was a lot of planning, there was a lot of documents, there was a lot of ideas that were proposed for funding that for various reasons, you know, didn't make the cut. And there's a certain level of fatigue is my sense, that we just can't ignore. And you could say, well, then the people who are fatigued should just go off and do their own thing, you know, and we'll work with the younger generation. But that to me gets back to this issue of stewardship. Like, how do we ensure that we're not asking people to reinvent wheels or you know, relive experiences? In particular right now, that's putting as much strain on federal program managers, program directors, and others in the federal government. Somehow we got to figure out how to circumvent that. I still see this this Dear Colleague letter call for something to be looked at as an opportunity, but I'm also just trying to figure out how to, you know, get towards that longer term vision where we're not reinventing things. Thanks.
Thanks, Hayo. I don't know, Lauren, if you want to respond, or I see you acknowledging it in your own way also. Any other thoughts on Hayo's comment about how we get to a sort of longer term sustained approach to stewardship that doesn't kind of have the reinventing the wheel aspects? I think we heard a lot of innovation today, in fact, that I would like to channel. Larry, your hand is in the air.
So thanks. Yeah, and I agree with much of what Hayo has said, although, you know, one of the reasons we have heard today about many things that we've heard about over the last decade, and the reason for that is that we haven't addressed it. You know, there's a lot of things that, you know, this is such a huge magnitude to the issues of data stewardship, environmental observations, collecting, managing, utilizing, and there's just so many aspects of it that it's hard to set a strategy in motion that is maintained. And so I can understand why we keep coming back to so many of these issues. At the same time, you know, and I do also appreciate your encouragement to establish and maintain a long-term data strategy. I'm not sure this is the time for this right now, and that, you know, the many of the strategies that we have, the protocols that we have lived by for the last, you know, 20, 30 years have been thrown out the window in the last year or last 3 to 6 months. And so, you know, it seems like more importantly than coming up with a strategy that's going to be ignored anyway, it seems like this is the time to try and identify, you know, what are the critical issues sitting on our plate right in front of us, and what do we as a community need to do now to respond to this crisis? And I don't mean to you know, belittle or in any way, you know, I want to, you know, praise all the data managers who have done such a wonderful job for us for all these years, and I really appreciate everything that they've struggled with to get us to where we are, and the incredible value that has come from these data sets. And right now, where there is so little funding going into renewed research activities, this is the time when we really need to utilize this historic data so that we can continue to advance progress in science by building on the historical activities that have been accomplished. So anyway, I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Larry. In thinking about immediate actions or urgent actions, and I've maybe, you know, it's easy to miss a publication. Have there been any op-eds focused on Arctic or polar research about the potential rising role of data repositories in scientific research as budgets are falling, or is that too doom and gloom of a commentary to make? Because we continue to hear that coming up, and I'm just curious if there's a broader conversation happening about that.
If I could just respond to that, I don't think it's it is doom and gloom, but it's not too doom and gloom. But the issue is not that it's the issue is that, you know, we've been in this crisis mode really since January. I mean, nobody was anticipating that, and so I don't think there's. I did see that John Holdren just put out a nice op-ed. Doesn't completely address this, but so I think there hasn't been a whole lot that's come out in the broader community at this point, but there is a need for that, I guess.
Well, thanks for all those comments. And as we kind of widely acknowledge the situation and the context we're operating in, I think it is more important than ever for, as Lauren said, for us to have these opportunities to gather and get innovative about, get clear about what's most critical and get innovative about what we do about it. And I think having an open forum like this is one of the greatest tools we have at our disposal right now. So I'm really so pleased that so many people joined us today, and that we had an opportunity to hear from you. Let's take a comment from Florence, and then I'll point to some next steps as we close our discussion. Florence.
Yeah, so early on, Sandy, you mentioned benefit assessment partnerships, and it might be worth just saying a few words about those again in light of what Larry said.
I humbly accept that request. Thank you, Florence. So we didn't go into a lot of detail today about the work that US AON does on societal benefit assessment. We have taken opportunities to discuss it at other fora, including at the US AON Showcase. Benefit assessment is a set of methodologies and tools that we've developed, and Hazel can drop in some links from our website. We're still very much in a kind of growth and building place with this work right now. But to Torsten's point also about the urgency of clarifying what purposes our research and data collection efforts are serving through a societal benefit lens. It's a really important set of conversations to have right now. And to the extent that the work we do through this tool can support that, we're very much open to having those conversations with anybody on this call. So if that's not familiar language to you and you'd like to learn more, you can always reach out to Hazel and I. We recently had ICARP collaborations public webinar on May 22nd through the risks and hazards team, where we talked more in depth about our work there. And we're always open to finding more partnerships to help individual researchers tell their benefit story, or research programs tell their benefit story. And we ourselves are somewhat capacity constrained in how much we can do that, but we're focusing on developing tools over this summer to make the crowdsourcing aspects of that more readily available. Thanks, Hazel, for all your busy work in the chat. And then I guess I might see if I can just share the screen with our slides here, just to close out the meeting, and some of the next steps that, oops, no, I did that wrong. Everyone can see the screen?
Yeah, it looks good. And maybe as you do this, Sandy, I put together a quick poll to see if there's specific topics that folks want to focus on. So while we talk about our plans, maybe consider that, and I'll open it and you can answer it at your leisure.
Okay, thanks, Hazel. Yeah, so I mean, we just had these two high-level bullets here for our specific next steps. We had hoped during the discussion that if anybody had more kind of concrete actions that they would like to take before September, or to support something other than white paper development, that would come out of the discussion. I think there were some interesting opportunities there. I know Anna Liljedahl put something in the chat about a climate and cryosphere meeting in New Zealand that got a lot of attention. And really, I hope just some of the conversations and partnership ideas that you kind of fostered or moved forward today already lead you on your own to make some of those next steps. But I do think it would be worthwhile if anybody was inspired today to think about leading a white paper for the Arctic Observing Summit. Maybe you could drop some ideas in the chat, or just kind of identify from the people in your group if you want to tag up and have a follow-on conversation. If you do that, we would love to hear about it, because we do plan to reconvene in September with this same under this same concept, and maybe see what the evolution on some of the thinking about specific actions, potential white papers, even if one of those white papers is, you know, just exploring some of the data topics. There's many facets to think about there. And I did want to say that I mentioned this distributed governance white paper that I've already, with some of the people who worked on the AGU poster, started putting some pen to paper to think about maybe developing this concept of distributed stewardship in a way that helps us organize ourselves better for the AOS, and maybe even moving towards the IPY. And if anybody has a real interest in governance and institutional analysis and how it relates to sustainable stewardship, and you'd like to join in this effort, please reach out to me, and let's have a conversation about that. So I mentioned we were going to reconvene in September also, so there will be some follow-ups. And as Hazel mentioned, the US AON self-forming team is going to continue to be active in this conversation in the months and years ahead. So please join the team directly if you haven't already. And I will stop sharing there, because I know Hazel did a poll also, and I can't see it.
Thanks, Sandy. It looks like Nora's interested in the white paper. We have a couple of folks who have answered the poll, so thanks for doing that. Knowing that sometimes it's hard to type and listen at the same time, I'm just going to leave that open for a few more minutes. But if you are done, feel free to hop off, and I can't see the answers to the poll till I close it. So that'll be a mystery for a few minutes more. But thank you again for the really wonderful discussion. I think this is it feels really invigorating and exciting to have this space, and we will try to make good use of it over the next. Oh yeah, I guess we'll just think about our next meeting and how to best use this team. And thank you again for joining.
Thanks, everyone. Looking forward to what the poll says.
Thank you. This was great.
Thanks for joining.
I'll stay on, Hazel, so we can see the poll.
Yeah, looks like probably folks have answered it. Remy and Brian have our email addresses if they have other things. So share results. Let's see. Can you see it? I don't know that I can see it.
I see something that says wrap up poll and close, so I'll hit that.
Huh. In order to view the details, I have to sign into Zoom, which means I have to sign into LastPass, which means that's going to just take me a minute. So
Okay, great. It all came together in the end.
it did. That was a great call.
It was. I know Nancy wrote a really nice note after she had to leave. There was a lot of engagement.
We do have another call right after this. So I emailed them to say we might be a minute late, but.
Okay, I will jump onto that right now.
Okay, I'm going to make sure I can find this poll before I sign off.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Hazel.
Yeah. Nice. I got it. Wow, really raining now. Bye, Brian. Good to see you.